Thank you all for being here today. It is a pleasure that I get the opportunity to speak to you about a topic I am passionate about and a topic that some of you may have been or will be touched by at some point in your life. So I want to start off by asking you all a question. With a show of hands, how many of you know someone who is in prison or has been to prison? Now I understand this can be a tough topic, so please do not feel compelled to raise your hand. For those of you who did raise your hand, you are not alone. The United States has the highest prison population rate in the world. There are well over 2.3 million people in the United States prisons or jails today, with many of them serving multiple year sentences for minor and nonviolent offenses. 1 in 42 Americans are under some kind of correctional supervision. Data from 2009 suggests that 50.7% of the U.S. prison population is incarcerated for drug offenses, 35% for public order. Public order includes things such as immigration, weapons charges, selling ice cream without a license, and even feeding the homeless without a license. 7.9%, only 7.9% are in prison for violent crimes. 5.8% for property related, and 0.7% is defined as other. This means that 86% of the people incarcerated today are behind bars for nonviolent crimes. So my question is this: are we doing everything we can to reduce the number of crimes or lessen our prisons of nonviolent criminals? According to the statistics, this does not appear to be the case. These are a few of the things I am going to talk to you about today to help paint a picture of reform and of how reform in the prison system is needed. So we look at the billions of dollars spent every year in American prisons. Taxpayers spend in excess of $60 billion. The continuous expansion of prison budgets has resulted in the decrease of needed funds that could be applied to education and health care. In California alone, it costs an average of $47,102 a year to incarcerate one inmate in a state prison. In our justice system, victims are victimized twice, once by the perpetrator of the crime against them, and the other by the state that enforces the victim to pay for the punishment of the assailant through taxes. All of this money goes to harboring more criminals and turning the prisons into a breeding ground and educational institution for small-time criminals to become a highly skilled criminal once released. Prison brings together some of the worst and most violent offenders with minor offenders into close quarters, allowing for a criminal social network to form. Consider this for a minute. If a man commits a crime today and is put behind bars in a cage with other criminals, after which he is released back on the streets, do you think that man is going to be more dangerous to society after spending time in prison with other violent criminals, or less dangerous? The latest statistics show that 2 out of 3 adults released from prison are reconvicted within 2 years. This is not a success rate that anyone should be proud of. Just think of the reaction from American citizens if our schools were only succeeding in educating 30% of our children, or if our hospitals were failing to treat 70% of their patients. So why is it acceptable that our prison systems are failing? Yes, I agree, prisons are not just about rehabilitation, but it should be an important part of what they do if we want the American society to be safer. The goal is to prepare the individual and return them to society as a productive member through education, work skills, treating others with respect, and self-discipline. Statistics show that younger criminals who have committed fewer and less severe crimes are more likely to change through reform schools or boot camps that are set up to give these individuals the skills and discipline they need, which are missing from their lives. The downside to this is that criminals who do not have access to such educational resources and programs in their societies only act in their best interest by gaining access to prisons. However, if these prisons are able to provide access to the resources while in prison, then perhaps there is a chance of reforming criminals into productive members of society. Some ideas brought about liberals on prison reform and most recently published in the New York Times include: reinstate parole in prison systems that do not allow it, eliminate the private prison industry which encourage incarceration, emphasize a range of preventive approaches which can be cost beneficial, also increase access to drug and mental health courts to divert more defendants from prison when their incarceration does not serve the public interest. Encourage and assist inmates with applying for Pell Grants so they have the opportunity to become educated while incarcerated. And finally, let's consider reforms that would benefit people who are incarcerated on immigration charges, since this makes up daily census of over 30,000 people and is larger than most state prison systems. We need more programs, such as the Boys and Girls Clubs, to help stop the process of becoming a criminal. Reform has to start outside the prison walls within our own society. So in closing, I want us to reflect back to the statistics I gave you. 2.3 million Americans behind bars, 86% of those incarcerated for nonviolent crimes. 2 out of 3 criminals released will be convicted within the 2 years after being released. And the billions of dollars spent each year in housing unproductive criminals. Is our penal system doing enough today to help people reform for their own sakes and benefits to society as a whole? Can we do more in our prisons to help rehabilitate offenders and prepare them for life without crime when they are released? No matter what reforms we introduce and implement, there are always going to be those we have to send to prison. There is no argument to that at all. But there can be help for the 86% of nonviolent criminals we send to prison every day. So think back to the question I asked a few moments ago when I asked you all to raise your hand if you knew someone who was in prison or had been in prison. So with the show of hands again, how many of you think these individuals would have made better decisions or came out of prison as a more productive member of society if they went through a reform program that would have given them an education and provided them with the necessary skills to be successful outside of the prison walls?